Hello everyone. Welcoming us to the dermatology discussion of our step 2, and we are going to start by looking at the layers of the skin. Um, we know that the skin is the largest organ in the body, and the skin is divided into three essential layers: the outermost epidermis, the middle dermis, and the innermost subcutaneous fat, or the hypodermis, or the subcutis. The epidermis, which is the outermost portion, is further divided into five different layers, and these layers are clinically relevant because we have changes that happens to this layer in different pathologies, in different skin diseases, right? The outermost one is the stratum corneum. The next is the stratum lucidium. So the lucidium is not present in all skin parts. Like, it's only present in areas of thick skin, which is the palm and the sole. The next is the stratum granulosum, which is very important, just like the corneum. Both of them are important because they change in some disease, which we are going to look at very soon. Beneath the stratum granulosum is the stratum spinosum, right? And then the regenerative layer, which is the one beneath the stratum basale, which generates and replace, you know, um, the layers above it. So we have so many cells that are submerged within and interspersed within these layers: the keratinocyte, the melanocyte, the sweat glands, you know, the sebum or the sebaceous glands, and the other one. So yeah, so that's that about the layer of the skin. So what does it do? The skin provides a barrier. It provides a barrier and offer immunologic protection against the environment. So we have different skin pathologies that occur because you have a compromise of the barrier and the immunologic protection of the skin, right? So the skin is just like an outer covering that kind of protect our body from the agent in the environment. It helps to regulate body temperature. Of course, we have the blood vessels within the skin. The vasodilates vasoconstrict in response to temperature changes. It also helps to regulate fluids and electrolyte balance, through sweating and the likes. It allows for touch and sensation because it contains of sensory nerve ending. So it helps us to feel sensations, um, touch, pressure, vibration, and the likes. So that is that about the function. So now is to identify the different characteristic lesions that can happen that can affect the skin. The first one is the macule, right? So we have the flat lesions and the raised lesion. We already know this. It's not strange. The macule is a flat lesion that is less than 1 cm. So once you see any flat lesion, any lesion that is continuous with the surrounding skin, right, in terms of the level, so that's a flat lesion. If it's less than 1 cm, it's a macule. Example, the freckle, the labial macule, just like we have here. Then, if the flat lesion is more than 1 cm, we call it a patch, right, which is here, right? This is a patch. The salmon patch, the herald patch, the you can see patch in vitiligo, right? We are going to talk about it very soon too. Then the purple, moving on to elevation. So we are done with the flat ones, the flat less than 1 cm, the macule greater than 1 cm, the patch. So the solid elevated palpable lesions. If it is less than 1 cm, you call it a purple. If it's more than 1 cm, you call it a plaque. So most of the time, the purple and the plaque occur together. So you have what we call papulosquamous diseases, which we are going to talk about very soon. Stuff like lichen planus, psoriasis, they are papulosquamous. So they have both purples and plaque, coexisting. So the only difference is that one is less than 1 cm, the other one is greater than 1 cm. So the one that is less than 1 cm is the purple, while the one that is greater than 1 cm is the plaque. So example of a purple is the mole. So you see papular lesions in acne, right? Then the plaque, elevated lesions greater than 1 cm, psoriasis, right? So This is an example of a pupil. You can see it's elevated compared to the surrounding skin, and it is small, less than 1 cm. So this is a pupil. Why this is also elevated, scaly, this is definitely going to be psoriasis, because I can see the white, scales, and the elevated lesions which are more than 1 cm. So this is a plaque. So I think about papulosquamous disorders. An example of that is psoriasis. Then moving on to solid elevated lesions that contain fluid, right? So if it's solid elevated, contains fluid but less than 1 cm, I call it a vesicle. A vesicle. A vesicle. So example of vesicle is what you have in chickenpox, in your shingles, your zoster, right? So it's classic for them. Although they are not the only one that cause vesicle, but most of the time when you see vesicles, think about chickenpox, think about shingles, think about atopic dermatitis, right? Um, we are going to talk about them very soon. So we are going to see them. So this is an example of vesicular lesions. You can see these are lesions that are, present in a particular segment, like a dermatomal distribution, and they contain fluid, and they are elevated, but they are less than 1 cm. So this is your um, vesicles, right? So if it's more than 1 cm containing fluid, like something like this, call this a bulle, right? So this is a bulla for singular. So this is a bulla, right? Fluid containing blister more than 1 cm. Example, your bullous pemphigoid. Then we have cysts. So cysts are just like epithelium lined sac containing materials of fluid. So follicular cysts, I don't have a picture of that, you know, um, like your pillar cyst or a follicular cyst in the scalp. Maybe when we get to that section, we are going to look for image that that shows that. The pustules, just a vesicle that contains pus, not just any ordinary fluid, but pus. So once you see pus, you know, think about pustules. You don't even need to be characterizing the size. Most of the time, pustules are very small, like less than 1 cm. So, but once you see that whitish, pus-like, content, think about pustules. You can see that in pustular psoriasis. Wheels. So wheels are just like transient edematous, papules or plaques. So elevated lesions, less than 1 cm, papule, greater than 1 cm, plaque, that are swollen, but they are transient. So within like 24 to 48 hours, they disappear. That is a wheal, and it is usually due to um, dermal edema. So when you have installation of fluid into the vessels from the vessels within the dermis, right? That is what brings about the wheal. So, the wheal is very common in urticaria rash or hives. So allergic reactions. We are going to see that too. So they will just tell you that you see a solid lesion elevated in the edematous, that disappears within few hours. This is definitely going to be a wheal. Um, so scales. So some of these lesions can have some attachments, right? So for example, you can have scales. So scales is just flaking off of the stratum corneum. So the keratinocyte is shed off, and they still hang around. They hang around within the lesion. So just like we have here, we see this background erythematous lesion having some scaly deposits. So this is a scale. It's due to flaking off of the cells of the stratum corneum, which predominantly contains the keratinocytes. So this is the wheel we are talking about. You can see these lesions are big, right? They are like plaques, right? And they have this irregular pattern, and they kind of disappears within 24 to 48 hours. So they are transient in nature. So that's the basic characteristic you have to look out for. That transient, pattern. Um, then we have the crust. The crust. Uh, the crust is just exudate of dried serum, blood, or pus. So most of the time you have bursting of these bullous lesions, bursting of these pustular lesions, bursting of these hemorrhagic lesions. So when they burst, they release their content, and the content dries off within the skin surface. So the drying off of the blood, the drying off of the pores, the drying off of the serum, right? Can form crust. And one classic lesion that is actually a formation of crust is impetigo, impetigo, impetigo. Yeah. So the breakage of that lesions containing the serum, containing blood or pus, with escape or extraction of that content, drying of the content forms the crust. So ulcer is just like a defect, like a break in the epidermis or the upper dermis. So which you have in diabetic foot ulcer. So you just see like a break in the dermis, and sometimes, yeah, the epidermis, and sometimes extending to the upper dermis. Of course, that's where extend to the upper dermis. Because if it's confined to the epidermis, it could just be like maybe an erosion. So if it penetrates down, it becomes an ulcer. So there has to be compromise of the epidermis and the upper dermis for you to call it an ulcer. Lichenification. So this is very important, and this indicates chronicity. So when you have irritation of an area, you have constant scratching due to excoriation. At the end of the day, you are going to have hypertrophy of that area and thickened, you know, pattern in that area with fissures. So they will look thickened, they will look, sometimes they can be even hyperpigmented. So they will look thickened, hyperpigmented with reduction in the skin marking. The skin lines that are supposed to be there will be absent because of constant scratching of that area. So that is lichenification. So it's usually due to chronic scratching, and you can see that in all these periodic diseases like periodic scabies or eczema. So thickened pattern of the epidermis with loss of the normal skin marking is characteristic for lichenification. Um, Moving on to the hypersensitivity reactions, and okay, we have an algorithm here. I don't really think we need to even waste time with this algorithm because we might not really get much. But a typical skin rash might be categorized into four different patterns. A pustular pattern, that means you have like a pus collecting within, a vesicle, right? Called a pustular, we have said. Example of that is like pustular psoriasis. Um, Sometimes, you can have um, uh, vesicles and bullous lesions collecting together. So vesiculobullous disorders. So that happens in some of those bullous disease like dermatitis epiphyseal, like you know sometimes in severe form of atopic dermatitis you can have vesiculobullous you know um, disease too, lesions too. And what you should know here is that they are not purulent. They are just blisters. They are like bullae that are not purulent. So they don't have pus. When they have pus, you call them pustular. When they don't have pus, you just leave them as vesiculobullous. So vesicles like in chickenpox, bullous like in bullous pemphigoid. Sometimes you can have them coexisting, right? They can coexist sometimes. Then enzymatous lesions. So enzymatous lesions usually appear dry. They are puritic, they are dry, they are thick, and they are swollen. They are edematous. But the two major stuff that you should look out for eczematous lesion is the dryness and the itchiness. The dryness and the itchiness is very important. So most of the time you see that they appear scaly, erythematous, papules and plaques. That's what you find. We are not going to be getting much from what I'm saying now because we are just looking at an algorithm. By the time we start taking all those lesions individually, it will make much more sense to us. So I'm just going to rush through this part. So the eczematous lesions, scaly erythematous, uh, papules and plaque that is dry and that is puritic. While papulosquamous, they are usually well demarcated, scaly papules and plaques too. You can see that you don't have any much difference in what they are saying here. They are saying eczema is scaly, erythematous, papule and plaque, and you are saying papulosquamous is well demarcated, scaly papules. So, but just as I've mentioned, most of the eczematous lesions, they appear dry and they are puritic, right? Um, the papulosquamous lesions contains well demarcated papules and plaque. They are not, dry like that. But most of the time, the appearance, the shape, the location gives it out for the papillosquamous. And they have some other lesions that you are going to see. For example, if you are talking about papillosquamous disorders, most of the time you are going to be talking about lichen planus or psoriasis. And psoriasis, we have other things that you look out for, which I'm going to mention. Lichen planus have some characteristic lesions that you are going to see that will raise your suspicion. So that's why I'm saying we might not get much from this algorithm now. Then the eczematous lesion are further divided into 4 different types. Atopic dermatitis that we are going to talk about very soon. The erythematous purple and vesicles. Contact dermatitis, where they find erythematous purple and vesicles. For the stasis dermatitis, this is just more like hyperpigmentation of the medial side of the ankle. It occurs in the upper part of the ankle on the medial side. I just see that area being dermatous, swollen, and it's hyperpigmented. It looks black, darkish, right? Most of the time, it come from venous stasis. Maybe the person has some varicose vein, or the person is obese, or the person is just, not ambulating for a long time. So you have pulling up of blood within the veins in that area, leading to inflammation, with deposits of so many pigment, hemosiderin, and the likes that brings about the dermatitis. And of course, it can also impair, perfusion, right? When the venous pressure becomes more than the arterial pressure, you can even start compressing on the arterial, supplies, and it can even compromise blood flow to that area, leading to ischemic injury in a way. So inability to drain blood from that area and inability to adequately perfuse that area too can lead to the ischemia, which can bring about the venous ulcer. I see it in the gaiter area, which is the upper medial ankle. So once you see a lesion in the upper medial part of the ankle, think about venous issues. Think about venous issues, and most of the venous issues are associated with stasis dermatitis, in which you see hyperpigmented edematous lesion. So I'm not emphasizing contact dermatitis now and atopic dermatitis now because we are going to talk about them just very soon. So they are very easy stuff. Then the seborrheic dermatitis. The presentation kind of differs depending on the age. Infants less than 2 years, children more than 2 years to 12 years, and adults. So in infants, they usually affect the dipal area, right? It is the dipal area that they usually affect, and the head. So you see the cradle cap and the dipal rash. And what do you see? What do you look out for? Just yellowish scales. In the dipal area, you are going to get the question telling you the experience of blisters, erosion with yellow scales in the diaper. That is seborrheic dermatitis. Or there is blisters, erosion, or plaques within the head, within the scalp, with yellow, greasy scales or crusting. That is seborrheic dermatitis. You have to look out for that greasy yellow pattern. It should be there. While in children or adults, it's usually common in the face and maybe the upper chest, where you have a lot of sebum being produced. We are going to talk about seborrheic dermatitis very well. And what you are going to have is red, scaly, thin plaques in the face. Let's go down to the rash so that we can dilate more, and then I'm just ignore this table. Before we move to the lesions, we have the hypersensitivity reactions. This is already stuff we are familiar with. Type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. And hypersensitivity reactions generally are just exaggerated, pathologic immune response to normal innocuous exogenous or endogenous um, antigens, right? So we have the type 1, the type 2, the type 3, the type 4. So for the type 1, what is basically happening there is just you have an individual that is already sensitized, to this allergen. And when there's sensitization, it means that you have the allergen being exposed to the T cells already, and they are already forming the memory T cells. And by the time you get re-exposed to the what's it called? Sorry, just a minute.